Before the air turns heavy with midday heat, the temple breathes in cool green silence. Mist hangs low in the courtyard, not dramatic, just present, a thin veil that softens edges. Leaves drip from last night's rain. Somewhere beyond the stone, a bird calls once and stops. You walk barefoot or in simple sandals, quiet steps, because anything loud feels disrespectful here, even if no one says it aloud. The towers ahead rise like stacked shadows, and the faces appear gradually as the mist shifts. They do not feel like statues. They feel like watchers, calm, worn, patient, carved into towers that are part mountain, part puzzle. The meaning of these faces is debated by scholars. Some interpretations connect them to Avalokiteśvara or other religious/royal symbolism, but certainty is elusive, and that uncertainty is part of their power. You don't debate meaning while you work. You work. You are not a solitary genius with a hammer. You are part of a team, quietly coordinated. There are men who haul water. Men who mix lime or mortar where needed. Men who carry tools wrapped in cloth. Men who keep count of blocks and tasks. And there are stone workers, roughers, finishers, detail hands, each with a different patience. A temple like this is not built by one talent. It is built by many steady talents arranged like gears. The great building programs associated with Jayavarman VII created demand for labor, materials, and organization on a huge scale. You don't need to name the whole bureaucracy to feel it. You feel it in schedules, in inspection, in the way your foreman looks at the face and says nothing, just points to a plane that must be cleaner, calmer, more alive. Your day begins with the stone, not the face. Sandstone is a generous material in skilled hands, but it punishes careless ones. It has grain. It has veins. It has moods: dry stone, damp stone, stone warmed by sun, stone cooled by rain. Research on Khmer sculpture materials shows that stone selection and sourcing mattered. Specific sandstone types were deliberately chosen and quarried, sometimes from far from Angkor. When you tap the surface lightly, you listen to the sound. A dull sound can mean a hidden weakness. A brighter sound can mean solid interior. You don't call it science. You call it craft sense. Your tools are not ornate. They are working objects. A chisel with a tip you keep sharp enough to bite stone without tearing it. A mallet worn smooth where your hand grips it. A straight edge. A line cord. Sometimes a measuring stick. Sometimes a small brush to clear dust so you can see the plane you're shaping. We keep tool claims realistic. Iron production and metal industries around Angkor are documented, supporting the presence of iron tools in this broader world. Even so, your most important tool is your pace. Too fast and you chip a cheek line you can't restore. Too slow and you miss the rhythm and start pressing too hard. The work wants a steady hand, not a heroic one. Wood holds you up. Wood holds your life. The scaffold is built by carpenters who understand weight and humidity. In the wet season, wood swells. In heat, it dries. Ropes loosen. Knots must be checked. No one announces this like a lesson. It is checked because it must be checked. You climb carefully with tools tucked close. You step onto the plank. You test your weight once. Then twice. Then you begin. Not because you are brave. Because you trust the crew, and you do not want to insult that trust with carelessness. You don't start a face at the nose. You start earlier, rougher. Planes first. Angles. The structure that will later hold the softness of a smile. You clear dust with a brush. You run your fingers over the stone. The stone feels cool, slightly damp. Moss nearby holds water like a sponge. The jungle air brings moisture to every surface. Your foreman wants the face to read from a distance. The eyebrows must hold shadow. The nose ridge must catch light. The mouth must be calm, not cartoonish, not sharp. And because scholars disagree about the identity of the faces, your job is not to decide the theology. Your job is to carve serenity into stone, serenity that can plausibly serve both royal authority and spiritual compassion. Your day is paced by sound. Tap. 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 A soft crunch of stone dust. A pause. A brush stroke across the surface. Then again. Stone on stone has a hypnotic quality. It is repetitive without being mindless. Each tap is slightly different because each tap lands on a slightly different part of the plane. If you strike too hard, the stone fractures. If you strike too soft, the chisel skates and scratches. So you strike just enough. And that just enough becomes a lullaby made of labor. Stone dust floats in the humid air. It sticks to sweat. It collects in your hairline. It makes your lips dry. You drink water in small amounts, because too much at once makes your belly heavy on the scaffold. You wipe your hands. You wipe the chisel handle. You keep grip steady. Dust is also a language. Fresh dust is pale and soft. Dust from a deeper cut can look darker. Dust tells you whether the stone is cutting cleanly or crumbling. And when the face begins to emerge, dust outlines it like fog. You stop often not from laziness, but to see. To let your eyes recognize the shape. When you climb down, the day's heat is thicker. The temple stones hold warmth. The jungle holds moisture. Your clothes cling slightly. At home, life is practical. You have a wife who understands long work days. Children who understand hunger comes on schedule, not instantly. Food is simple and steady: rice, fish when available, vegetables, herbs. You don't eat like a prince. You eat like a worker whose body must last. Your wife notices the dust before you speak. She sees it in the fold of your cloth. She sees it in the creases of your hands. She knows how your shoulders will feel later. And in the way she sets water down for you, she is protecting your craft as much as you are shaping stone. Valuable things move around a major site: tools, metal, rope, carved blocks, supplies. Not everyone is loyal. Not every worker is paid equally. Not every official is honest. So protection is quiet. Tools kept wrapped and close. Counts taken at day's end. Foremen watching without shouting. Carved surfaces guarded from careless hands. You don't invent elaborate spy plots. You recognize simple human risks: theft, jealousy, shortcuts, and small sabotage born from fatigue. This is how real sites stay functioning. And you keep working, because the safest response to a world full of risk is competence done calmly, day after day. Before a face exists, there is a block. Before a block exists at the temple, there is quarry work, slow, loud, and exhausting. The sandstone used in Angkor monuments is documented as coming from quarry zones such as the Kulen mountain area, with research discussing supply sources and transport routes into the Angkor region. You are not always sent to the quarries, but you know them the way a baker knows the grain store. You hear talk. Which stone cuts cleanly? Which stone crumbles? Which stone is good for broad plains, and which holds detail without flaking? The face you carve depends on those choices made far away. And the listener can feel the scale. A temple begins outside itself. The stone you work today began its journey 40 kilometers away. Not yesterday. Not last week. Months ago, when the dry season still held firm and the rivers ran low enough to matter. You can still see the quarry marks if you look closely. Faint chisel scratches on the underside. Charcoal numbers that haven't fully weathered away. The ghost of hands you will never meet. At Phnom Kulen, northeast of where you stand now, men with tools similar to yours broke sandstone from the earth. Not randomly. Not carelessly. They selected blocks the way you select chisel angles with knowledge earned through failure. Through stone that crumbled. Through blocks that split mid-journey. Through decades of learning what the mountain will give and what it will not. The mountain has layers. Visible from a distance as subtle color shifts in the cliff face. Pale gray sandstone that crumbles like dried mud. Deep red sandstone that holds cracks you cannot see until the block splits mid-transport. Golden brown sandstone with grain so tight it dulls your chisel after 10 strokes. The quarry workers know these layers the way you know the faces you carve. By color. By texture. By the sound they make when struck. They walk the exposed cliff face tapping stone with iron rods, listening. Tap. Listen. Move 2 steps. Tap again. A dull sound means weakness inside trapped air pockets, ancient mud seams, hidden voids. A bright ring means solid interior compressed sediment, minimal gaps, stone that will cooperate. A warbling echo means hidden vein or fault line looks good on surface, fails under pressure. They mark the good sections with charcoal. Simple marks. A circle means cut here. An X means avoid internal flaw. A line means grain runs this direction. They avoid the rest. Not because stone is scarce. Because transporting bad stone 40 kilometers wastes more than leaving it in the mountain. When a section is chosen, they do not attack it with force. They study the natural breaks. Sandstone, like all stone, has invisible planes where ancient sediment layered. Millions of years of river deposits compressed into rock. The plains remember their origins. They want to separate along those ancient boundaries. If you work against these plains, the stone fights you. Chips instead of splits. Cracks instead of clean breaks. Wasted effort. If you work with them, the stone cooperates. The quarrymen insert wooden wedges into natural cracks. Not random cracks. Cracks that run parallel to the grain. The wedges are shaped like elongated triangles, narrow tip, wide base. Made from hardwood that doesn't compress under pressure. Teak, when available. Ironwood, when not. They tap the wedges in lightly at first. Just enough to hold position. Then they soak the wedges with water. Not once. Repeatedly. Morning water. Midday water. Evening water. The wood drinks. Swells. Expands slowly, patiently, with pressure that builds like a held breath. The stone resists for days. Then it sighs. A small sound. A crack that travels from wedge to wedge, connecting them like a whispered conversation. The block separates along its own grain, not against it. This takes days, sometimes weeks, but the block comes free cleanly. No internal damage. No hidden fractures waiting to surprise a carver 6 months later. No regrets. The blocks are massive. A single stone for a face tower weighs more than 20 men. Moving it requires coordination that feels less like labor and more like ceremony. During the dry season, November through March, the preferred method is water. Not because water is easier. Because water is kinder to stone. The canal system between Phnom Kulen and the Siem Reap River was not built for this temple alone. It serves rice fields, drinking water, and transport for decades of construction projects. But during quarry season, sections are cleared for stone rafts. A raft is not a boat. It is a platform of bundled logs lashed together with rope made from palm fiber. 12 to 16 logs, depending on stone weight. Arranged in 2 layers, bottom layer runs lengthwise, top layer runs crosswise. This creates a grid that distributes weight in multiple directions. The logs are chosen for buoyancy, lighter woods that float even when waterlogged. Kapok when available. Bamboo clusters when not. Each log is tested before use, placed in water, weighted with stones, watched for how deep it sinks. Logs that sink too far are rejected. The lashing must be tight enough to hold weight but flexible enough to bend with current. The rope makers use a specific pattern. Not random wrapping. A figure-8 knot around each intersection point where logs cross. Pulled tight. Tested by hand. If the rope creaks when pulled, it's tight enough. If it's silent, it needs more tension. The wet palm fiber grips better than dry. So they soak the rope before lashing. It shrinks as it dries, creating pressure that increases over time. Too rigid, and the raft cracks when it hits a submerged branch. The logs have no give, so impact force travels to the lashings, snapping them. Too loose, and the stone shifts mid-journey, capsizing the whole structure. Water enters between the logs, weight redistributes, tilt becomes roll becomes disaster. The raft makers have learned this balance. Through failures that sank stone. Through successes that delivered it intact. Through small adjustments that mean the difference between both. Loading a block onto a raft requires patience measured in hours, not minutes. Wooden rollers are placed beneath the stone. Teams of men push in rhythm, moving the block inch by inch toward the water's edge. Someone calls the rhythm. Not singing. Not chanting. Just a steady ha, ha, ha. That keeps 20 bodies pushing in unison. When the block reaches the raft's edge, it is lowered using lever poles and rope slings. If it drops too fast, it punches through the raft. If it tilts wrong, it slides off into the mud. Both outcomes mean starting over. So they lower it slow. So slow it feels like the stone is floating down on its own. Once loaded, the raft is guided downstream by polemen who walk the shallow edges. They do not steer so much as suggest direction. The current does most of the work. Their job is to prevent disaster, keeping the raft from grounding on sandbars, avoiding submerged rocks, nudging it back to center when it drifts toward the bank. The journey from Phnom Kulen to the staging area near Angkor Thom takes 2 to 3 days if the current is favorable. Longer if not. The rafts travel in groups of 3 or 4, never alone. If one raft tangles in debris, the others can assist. If a rope breaks, the others carry spare lashing. If the current turns dangerous, they tie together and ride it out as a single mass. But dry season does not last forever. And the building program does not stop when the rains come. Wet season transport is different. Heavier. Slower. Harder on both stone and men. When the canals flood and the currents turn violent, water transport becomes impossible. Rafts overturn. Ropes snap. Blocks sink into riverbeds where retrieving them costs more than cutting new ones. So during the monsoon months June through October, transport shifts to land. To elephants. An elephant can pull what 30 men cannot. But an elephant requires different thinking. Different respect. You do not command an elephant the way you command men. You negotiate. Each elephant has a temperament. Some are steady pull until told to stop, never complain, never rush. Some are proud pull well when praised, sulk when criticized, remember grievances for weeks. Some are young strong but impatient, need frequent rest, learn through repetition. The handlers know their animals the way you know your chisels. By feel. By history. By small signals invisible to outsiders. A flick of the ear means distress. A rumble in the throat means contentment. A shift in weight from front legs to back means the load is too heavy and pride is the only thing still pulling. The road from Phnom Kulen to Angkor is not paved. It is compacted earth, rutted from previous journeys, slick with rain during the wet months. 40 kilometers of mud that remembers every elephant that has crossed it. The stone blocks are loaded onto wooden sledges, flat platforms with curved front edges that slide over mud better than wheels roll. The curve matters. Too sharp, and the sledge digs into soft ground. Too shallow, and it catches on roots and rocks. The sledge makers shape the curve by eye, testing it on mud of different wetness until it glides. The sledge is harnessed to the elephant with thick rope and woven straps that distribute weight across the animal's chest and shoulders. Never the neck. Never a single point of pressure. The harness crosses the chest in an X pattern, meeting at a wooden crossbar behind the elephant's front legs. This spreads the load. Prevents rope burn. Allows the elephant to pull with its body, not just its neck. A handler walks beside the elephant's head, speaking softly, guiding with taps from a stick that signals direction but never punishes. 2 taps right shoulder equals turn right. 2 taps left shoulder equals turn left. 1 tap on the forehead equals stop. No taps, just voice equals keep going, you're doing well. The handler's voice is constant. Not loud. Not commanding. A low murmur that says I'm here, we're together, this is temporary. Behind the sledge, men walk with wooden levers, ready to pry the platform free if it sinks into soft ground. This happens often. Every 100 meters, sometimes more. The sledge sinks. The elephant strains. The handler speaks. The elephant pulls. The sledge moves forward a hand's width. Then it sinks again. The men pry. The sledge lifts. The elephant pulls. 2 meters gained. The process repeats. Rest stops are planned around water sources and shade. Not arbitrary distances. Specific trees that have provided shade for years. Specific streams where the bottom is firm enough for elephants to drink without sinking. Elephants overheat quickly when pulling heavy loads. Their bodies are not designed for sustained exertion in tropical humidity. The handlers watch for signs. Heavy breathing that doesn't slow during rest. Skin that feels dry instead of damp. A reluctance to drink, which means the exhaustion has passed into something worse. If an elephant collapses from exhaustion, the block stays where it fell until another elephant can be brought. sometimes days, sometimes a week. This delays everything. So handlers are cautious, stopping frequently, checking the animal's breathing, offering water and sugar cane as reward. Not bribery. Respect. The stone reaches the temple slower this way. But it reaches the temple intact. And the elephant survives to pull again. And that is what matters. Because elephants are not tools. They are partners in a task too large for humans alone. When blocks arrive at the Bayon site, whether by raft or sledge, they are not immediately given to carvers. They are staged, inspected, logged. A staging area exists west of the temple, where blocks are unloaded and arranged by size, grain quality, and intended use. A supervisor walks among them with a charcoal stick, marking each stone with notes only he understands. Some marks indicate structural placement, foundation blocks that require strength but not beauty. Some marks indicate decorative use, carvings that require fine grain and minimal flaws. Some marks indicate rejection blocks that developed cracks during transport and will be broken down for rubble fill. Before a block is assigned to a carver, it undergoes final inspection. The inspector taps it with an iron rod, listening for the same dull sound the quarry workers avoided months earlier. If the sound is wrong, the block is set aside. If the sound is right, the block is moved to the carving yard. Your block, the one you are working today, arrived 3 months ago. It came by raft during late dry season. It was logged, inspected, and assigned to your section of the temple based on its grain direction and the angle of the tower face it will become. You did not choose it. It was chosen for you based on what the stone could do and what you are trusted to make it become. This system, quarry to raft to staging to carver, has been running for years. Not just for this temple. 4 temples before this one. 4 temples that will come after. The entire empire runs on moving stone. Thousands of blocks per year. Hundreds of workers coordinating across 40 kilometers and 4 months of transport. It is not dramatic. It is not heroic. It is logistical. And logistics, when done well, become invisible. You do not think about the raft that carried your block. You do not think about the elephant that pulled it through mud. You do not think about the quarry worker who tapped the clip face and heard the right sound. But they are all here. In the stone. In the grain. In the fact that your chisel bites cleanly instead of chipping. The king's building program demands scale. Bayon is not the only temple rising. Priyakan to the north. Ta Proam to the east. Banti Ikadai to the south. All require stone. All require transport. All require the same invisible coordination. During peak construction years, the canal system operates at capacity. Rafts queue at staging points, waiting for their turn to unload. Elephant teams rotate on schedules measured in weeks, not days. Quarry workers cut stone faster than it can be transported, creating stockpiles that wait months for the next dry season. The entire system strains but does not break. Because breaking would mean delays. And delays would mean the king's vision falters. And no one wants to be the delay. You hear stories sometimes. A raft that overturned, losing 3 blocks to the riverbed. An elephant that died mid-pull, requiring the block to be left beside the road for a week. A quarry collapse that killed 2 workers and halted cutting for a month. These are not celebrated. They are absorbed. The system adjusts. New rafts are built. New elephants are assigned. New workers replace the dead. And the stone keeps moving. There is no single person who oversees all of this. No master coordinator standing at a map directing traffic. The system runs on inherited knowledge and localized decisions. Quarry supervisors know their quotas. Raft handlers know their routes. Elephant handlers know their limits. Staging supervisors know their inventories. Each group operates semi-independently, trusting that the others are doing their part. And mostly, they are. Because the alternative is chaos. And chaos means projects that span decades instead of years. Monuments that remain half-finished. Legacies that crumble before completion. The Khmer Empire has built enough to know this. They have refined the system through iteration, through failure, through incremental improvement. What you see as a single block of stone arriving at your feet represents decades of logistical learning compressed into routine. Some blocks never make it. Cracked during transport. Lost in floods. Rejected at inspection. These failures are factored into the quotas. For every 10 blocks cut at the quarry, 9 reach the temple. For every 9 that reach the temple, 8 pass final inspection. For every 8 that pass inspection, 7 become part of the structure. The rest become rubble, fill, or foundation material. This is not waste. This is reality. And the system accounts for it. You do not see this reality directly. You see one block. Your block. The one that survived quarry, raft, inspection, and assignment. The one that now sits before you, waiting to become a face that will watch over the city for centuries. But behind that block is a network. Invisible. Essential. Vast. Quarry workers whose names you do not know. Men who woke before dawn to tap cliff faces. Men who soaked wedges and waited days for stone to sigh. Men whose hands bear the same calluses as yours, just in different places. Raft handlers whose faces you will never see. Men who tied figure-8 knots in wet palm fiber. Men who pulled rafts through current, reading water the way you read grain. Men who lost rafts to floods and built new ones the next dry season. Elephant handlers who rested their animals in the shade while you slept. Men who spoke to elephants in low murmurs. Men who knew when to push and when to wait. Men who carried sugarcane rewards and offered them with respect, not command. Staging supervisors who marked your block with charcoal months before you touched it. Men who walked among hundreds of stones seeing patterns you cannot. Men who knew which block fits which tower based on grain, color, and angle. Men whose charcoal marks determined your work before you arrived. This network does not gather in one place. Does not coordinate through meetings or written plans. Does not know each other's names or see each other's faces. But each node in the network trusts the others to do their part. The quarry worker trusts the raft handler to transport carefully. The raft handler trusts the staging supervisor to assign wisely. The staging supervisor trusts you to carve well. You trust the quarry worker to have chosen solid stone. This trust is not based on friendship. It is based on necessity. And on shared knowledge that failure anywhere means failure everywhere. When you place your chisel against the stone, you inherit all of this. The quarry worker's careful listening. The raft handler's patient polling. The elephant handler's quiet respect. The staging supervisor's experienced eye. You do not think about them, but they are present. In the clean sound when your chisel strikes. In the grain that runs true. In the absence of hidden cracks. In the stone's willingness to cooperate. Some days, when the work goes well, you feel it. Not consciously. Not as gratitude towards specific people. But as a kind of rightness. A sense that the stone wants to become what you are making it become. That it traveled 40 kilometers to arrive at your hands. That it waited in the staging area for you specifically. That everything that came before was preparation for this transformation. This feeling is not mystical. It is practical. Good stone, properly selected, properly transported, properly assigned, works differently than bad stone. It resists less. Reveals more. Becomes more. Other days, when the work fights you, you feel that too. A block that splits unexpectedly. Grain that runs contrary to what the surface suggested. Hidden weakness that emerges only after hours of carving. These failures trace back. A quarry worker who misjudged the sound. A raft that hit something mid-journey, creating microfractures invisible to inspection. An elephant that pulled too hard on unstable ground, twisting the sledge slightly. A staging supervisor who assigned based on quota pressure instead of quality assessment. You do not know which failure caused your problem. You only know the stone betrayed the trust. And you must work around it or start over. The system accounts for this. For every 10 blocks cut at quarry, the system expects 1 or 2 to fail somewhere along the chain. The quotas reflect this. The timelines absorb it. The budget includes replacement. But the failures still feel personal. Because you are the end point. The one who discovers whether the entire 40-kilometer chain succeeded or broke. Whether the invisible labor network held or faltered. Whether trust was justified or misplaced. Most blocks succeed. the system works more often than it fails. Otherwise temples would not rise. Faces would not multiply. The king's vision would remain vision, not monument. But the system works because everyone knows failure is possible. The quarry worker taps more carefully because he knows someone downstream will discover his mistakes. The raft handler lashes more precisely because a lost block means a family somewhere worked for nothing. The elephant handler speaks more gently because exhausted animals delay everyone. The staging supervisor marks more thoughtfully because bad assignment wastes good carving. And you carve more carefully because your work is the final proof of whether the entire chain succeeded. This is what 40 kilometers means. Not distance. Dependence. You depend on people you will never thank. They depend on people they will never see. The monument depends on all of it working together across time and space. When tourists come centuries later, if tourists come, they will see faces. They will not see quarries. They will not see rafts. They will not see elephants. They will not see the staging area where your block waited for months. They will see only the final form. The face that emerged from cooperative effort. The calm expression made possible by invisible labor. The smile carved by your hands but delivered by dozens of others. This is fine. The network does not work for recognition. It works because not working means nothing gets built. And building something that outlasts you requires accepting that your contribution will be invisible. Absorbed into the whole. Present but not named. Essential but not celebrated. You place your chisel against the surface. You tap. The stone responds. Clean. Predictable. Cooperative. Because it was chosen well. Transported carefully. Inspected thoroughly. And now it is yours. For as long as it takes to turn raw block into calm face. The journey from mountain to temple is complete. The journey from stone to art begins now. And you do not think about logistics. You think about the next stroke. And the one after that. And the slow, patient accumulation of small cuts that eventually reveal something that was always hidden inside. Waiting. Not just in the stone, but in the network that brought the stone to you. The quarry workers listening. The raft handlers' patience. The elephant handlers' respect. The staging supervisor's judgment. All compressed into this single block. All waiting to become visible. All trusting you to complete what they began. Stone does not arrive. Stone is moved. Dragged. Floated. Lavered. Set down and shifted again. Studies on Angkor sandstone supply discuss transport routes and the practical problem of moving large stone blocks from quarry zones toward the building site. You picture it without dramatizing it. Teams in rhythm. Wooden rollers. Ropes that bite into palms. Wet earth that steals traction. And foremen counting steps by habit. When blocks reach the temple precinct, they are no longer nature. They become inventory material assigned to crews like yours. By your century, the empire's building programs are mature and demanding. Researchers studying Bayon period sculpture note deliberate selection of specific sandstone types and provenance questions, evidence that stone choice was not random. So in your workshop, you handle a blank with respect. You tap. You listen. You read the grain like a map. Because one hidden weakness can chip away a nostril line, a lip edge, a calm eyelid, details that carry the face's expression. And expression is what the Bayon asks for. Serenity that holds from far below. The stone beneath your chisel is not the same stone it was yesterday. Not because you changed it. Because the rain changed it. Sandstone is porous. Ancient compressed sediment full of microscopic gaps where water once flowed. When dry, these gaps hold air. When wet, they hold water. This changes everything. The weight. The texture. The way metal bites into surface. The sound when struck. The willingness to cooperate or resist. You cannot carve wet stone the same way you carve dry stone. Different tool angles. Different pressure. Different patience. During the dry season, stone arrives at the temple hardened by months without rain. The surface feels rough, almost gritty under your palm. Dust clings to it. Pale gray powder that coats your hands and fills the air with each strike. This dust is inevitable. Sandstone is compressed sand. When you carve it, you release particles that have been locked together for 400 million years. They become airborne. You breathe them. Everyone breathes them. The dust settles in your throat, your lungs, the corners of your eyes. By midday, every carver at Bayon looks like a ghost, pale with stone powder, coughing quietly, wiping faces with rags that no longer help. Dry stone carves aggressively. Your chisel removes material quickly. Too quickly, sometimes. A fraction too much pressure and the surface crumbles instead of cuts. Chips fly. Edges fracture. What should be a smooth plane becomes pockmarked with tiny failures. Dry stone does not forgive. It breaks before it bends. Shatters before it yields. You learn to work with lighter strikes, more passes, slower progress. Not because you are cautious by nature. Because the stone demands it. But when the monsoon comes, everything changes. The rain arrives suddenly in late May or early June. Not gradually. One day the sky is clear. The next day it pours. And it does not stop pouring for weeks. The stone drinks. Not all at once. Slowly, over days, the surface darkens as water penetrates the microscopic gaps. First the outer millimeters. Then deeper. Then deeper still. After 3 days of steady rain, the stone you carved yesterday is no longer the same material. It is heavier. Softer. More willing. Wet sandstone carves like butter compared to dry. Your chisel sinks into the surface with half the effort. The stone yields instead of resists. Peels away in thin, clean layers instead of crumbling into dust. The sound changes. Dry stone rings when struck a sharp, bright tone that carries across the courtyard. Wet stone thuds a deeper, muffled sound that travels no further than your hands. You can feel the difference in your wrist. Dry stone sends vibration up your arm with each strike. Wet stone absorbs impact, cushions the blow, asks for less. This softness is both gift and danger. Gift because detail work becomes possible. The delicate curve of an eyelid. The subtle hollow beneath a cheekbone. The exact angle where nose meets face. These details are nearly impossible in dry stone. One wrong strike and you carve too deep, ruining hours of work. But in wet stone, you can take small bites, testing as you go, correcting before damage becomes permanent. Wet stone forgives small mistakes. Dry stone does not. The danger is that wet stone is too soft. If you are not careful, your chisel sinks deeper than intended. What should be a shallow cut becomes a gouge. What should be a gentle curve becomes a sharp edge. The stone cooperates so readily that you must restrain yourself. Pull back. Lighten your touch. Trust less in force and more in angle. This requires different thinking. In dry stone, you push through resistance. In wet stone, you guide without pushing. The tool leads, but barely. Water management becomes its own craft. Not pouring water randomly. Knowing when to add it, how much to add, where to place it. You keep a clay pot of water beside your work. Not a large pot. A small one that you refill hourly. The water inside stays cleaner this way, free of stone dust that would turn it into abrasive slurry. You dip a rag into the pot. Not soaking it. Just dampening it enough that it releases moisture when pressed against stone. Then you lay the rag across the area you plan to carve. You wait. Not long. A minute, maybe two. Just enough for surface moisture to penetrate the first few millimeters. The stone darkens where the rag touched. This darkening tells you the water has entered. Now you can carve. You do not wet the entire block. Only the immediate area. Only the section you will work in the next 10 minutes. If you wet too much, the surface dries unevenly as you work, creating patches of hardness and softness that fight your chisel inconsistently. If you wet too little, the dry stone returns before you finish the cut, forcing you to restart with different pressure. The rhythm becomes, wet, carve, wet again, carve, wet again, carve. Small cycles. Repetitive. Meditative. The rag and the chisel work together, neither one sufficient alone. The stone's mood changes with the seasons. After 3 weeks of monsoon rain, the entire block is saturated. Water has penetrated not just the surface but deep into the interior. The stone is at its softest, most cooperative state. Carving feels effortless. Your chisel glides. Curves emerge with ease. Progress accelerates. But this softness is temporary. It lasts only as long as the rain continues and a few days after. Once the dry season returns, the stone begins releasing its moisture. Slowly at first. Then faster. The surface lightens from dark gray to pale brown. The texture roughens. The resistance increases. Within 2 weeks of the last rain, the stone is nearly as hard as it was before the monsoon. Within a month, it is fully dry again. And you must adjust your technique back to dry season methods. More force. Lighter cuts. More passes to achieve the same depth. Some carvers prefer wet stone. They work faster during the monsoon, taking advantage of the softness to complete detail work that would take twice as long in dry conditions. They rest more during the dry season, focusing on rough work that does not require precision. Other carvers prefer dry stone. They say wet stone is deceptive, looks easier but hides mistakes until the stone dries and reveals every imperfection. They prefer the honesty of dry stone. Hard, yes. Unforgiving, yes. But predictable. You prefer neither. You adapt. During the monsoon, you carve details. During the dry season, you carve planes. The stone dictates your schedule more than the foreman does. Wet carving also reveals grain in ways dry carving does not. Sandstone has invisible lines running through it, directions where the ancient sediment layered. In dry stone, these lines are subtle, almost invisible, detectable only by how the stone chips differently when struck from different angles. In wet stone, the grain becomes visible. Water follows the sediment layers, darkening them slightly more than the surrounding material. You can see thin lines running through the block, like wood grain but finer, less obvious. These lines tell you which direction the stone prefers to split. If you carve parallel to the grain, the stone cooperates. If you carve perpendicular to the grain, the stone resists, sometimes fracturing unpredictably. The wet stone shows you its internal structure. The dry stone hides it. This is knowledge you cannot gain any other way. You must wet the stone to see inside it. There are times when you do not wet the stone, even during the monsoon. When carving the structural cuts, the initial block shaping, the rough removal of excess material, you leave the stone dry. Dry stone removes material faster for these aggressive cuts. You need speed more than precision. You need dust control less because you are working outside the tower, away from enclosed spaces where dust becomes suffocating. Once the rough form is established, then you switch to wet carving. Then precision matters. Then you need to see the grain. Then the dust becomes a problem worth managing. Edge work also stays dry. The final millimeters of a nose. The thin ridge where cheekbone meets ear. The delicate outer curve of an ear. These edges need to dry completely before final carving. Whetstone is too soft for edges. The material crumbles away too easily, rounding corners that should be sharp, softening transitions that should be crisp. You let these sections air dry for a full day before touching them. Then you carve them dry, with the lightest possible pressure, using your sharpest chisel. 1 pass. Maybe 2. Then you stop. You do not get a third chance with edges. Your tools behave differently in whetstone. The chisel edge must be sharper, much sharper than for dry work. In dry stone, a slightly dull edge still removes material through force. It crushes and chips and grinds its way through. In whetstone, a dull edge does not cut. It compresses, pushes material down instead of removing it, creates a divot instead of a clean cut. You sharpen your tools more frequently during the monsoon. Every morning before work begins. Sometimes at midday if you are doing extensive detail work. The whetstone becomes as essential as the chisel itself. The sound feedback changes too. In dry stone, you hear the chisel bite. A sharp crack when the edge meets surface. A ringing tone when struck too hard. A scraping rasp when dragged across grain. These sounds tell you what is happening even when dust obscures your view. In whetstone, the sounds are muffled. Quiet thuds. Soft peeling noises. Wet scrapes. You cannot rely on sound as much. You must rely on feel. The resistance in your hands. The way the tool wants to sink or skip. The slight catch when you cross grain. Your hands learn to read what your ears cannot hear. Dust management is the primary reason most carvers prefer wet technique for any detailed work, regardless of season. Dry carving creates clouds. Within minutes, the air around you becomes hazy with floating particles. Your throat tightens. Your eyes water. Your lungs begin a slow, persistent cough that does not stop even when you rest. Older carvers, men who have worked 20, 30 years, cough constantly. Deep, wet coughs that bring up gray phlegm. Breathing problems that worsen each dry season. Some can no longer climb scaffolding because they cannot catch their breath. Some die young, lungs filled with stone dust they inhaled daily for decades. This is the hidden cost of carving. Not injury. Dust. Wet carving eliminates most dust. The water binds the particles, turning powder into damp grit that falls to the ground instead of floating into air. You still breathe some dust. It is impossible to avoid completely, but far less than when carving dry. After a day of wet carving, your throat feels clear. Your lungs do not ache. You do not wake at night coughing. This is not a small benefit. This is the difference between working until old age and dying before your children are grown. The foremen know this. They encourage wet carving during detail work, not just for quality but for health. Dead carvers do not finish faces. Sick carvers work slowly, make mistakes, require replacement. Water is cheap. Training new carvers is expensive. So water is provided freely, and carvers are taught to use it not as luxury but as necessity. You develop preferences over time. The exact dampness you prefer. Too wet, and the stone becomes muddy, coating your chisel with slurry that must be wiped away constantly. Too dry, and the dust returns, the stone hardens, the advantages disappear. You learn your ideal dampness by feel. When the rag leaves the stone darker but not dripping. When the surface yields without squishing. When the chisel cuts cleanly and the sound is soft but distinct. This cannot be taught. Only learned. Through hours of adjustment. Through faces carved in every possible condition. Through mistakes made in stone that was too wet, too dry, too recently rained on, too long since last rain. The stone teaches you. Not through words. Through resistance and cooperation. Through forgiveness and punishment. Through the way it behaves when you treat it correctly versus when you do not. You become a student of moisture. Of timing. Of patience. Of knowing when to work and when to wait for conditions to improve. The stone chooses more than pace. It chooses technique. It chooses tool angles. It chooses when you wet and when you do not. And you listen. Because fighting the stone's preferences means slower progress, more mistakes, shorter working life. Cooperation means efficiency. Cooperation means quality. Cooperation means you might still be carving when your children are old enough to hold chisels of their own. So you wet the stone. You wait. You carve. You wet again. You wait again. You carve again. Small cycles that accumulate into faces. Faces that will outlast everyone who carved them. Faces that will never know they were carved wet. But you will know. In the smoothness of the curves. In the precision of the details. In the fact that your lungs still work after 20 years. In the quiet cooperation between water, stone, metal, and hand. All working together. All necessary. All part of the craft that no one sees but everyone benefits from. The water dries. The stone hardens. The face remains. And the technique that created it disappears into invisibility. Known only to those who carve. Preserved only in the quality of the work. Present but unnamed. Essential but unseen. Like so much of what makes monuments possible. Your chisel does not stay sharp on its own. Metal is part of your story even if your hands touch only stone. Archaeological science and research on Angkorian industry emphasizes that iron tools were used in the Angkor period, and that iron production networks existed to support monument construction and daily life. So tool care is not a detail, it is survival. A dull chisel makes you strike harder. Hard strikes chip stone. Chipped stone creates rework. Rework costs time and reputation. So you sharpen. You reseat handles. You wrap tools at day's end. You treat metal like a resource, because it is. The chisel in your hand is older than your marriage. Older than your children. Older, perhaps, than you. You did not forge it. You inherited it from a carver who retired with hands too stiff to hold tools. He inherited it from someone before him. The metal remembers generations of hands. Generations of stone. Generations of sharpening that slowly reduced the blade from its original length to something shorter, thinner, more precious for its scarcity. Iron does not come from the temple. It comes from the king's stockpiles, distributed in controlled amounts based on need and priority. Not unlimited. Not freely given. Rationed. The Angkor Empire produces iron, but not enough to supply every project, every tool, every need simultaneously. Smelting requires charcoal. Charcoal requires trees. Trees require time to grow. The king's engineers manage the cycle carefully, balancing forest harvest with regrowth, balancing charcoal production with metal demand, balancing current projects with future needs. Bayon receives iron allocation based on the number of carvers working. Not generous allocation. Sufficient allocation. Enough to maintain tools, not enough to replace them frequently. This means your chisel is not disposable. It is an investment. A resource that must last years, not months. A tool that outlasts individual projects and individual carvers. The iron arrives at the temple as rough ingots. Small rectangular blocks weighing perhaps 2 pounds each. Dull gray metal with rough surfaces from the casting mold. These ingots are delivered to the temple blacksmith, a man who works in a covered workshop at the edge of the staging area, far enough from carved stone that sparks do not damage finished faces. The blacksmith does not make many new tools. His primary work is maintenance, repair, reshaping broken tools into usable tools, combining damaged pieces into functional pieces, stretching limited metal as far as possible. When a new chisel must be made, when old tools have been sharpened so many times they are too short to hold safely, the blacksmith begins with fire. Not a small fire. A forge fire. Hot enough to make iron glow orange, then yellow, then white at the edges. This heat requires charcoal, not wood. Wood burns too cool, too inconsistent. Charcoal burns steady, concentrated, hot enough to make iron malleable. The blacksmith feeds charcoal into a clay brick forge. Pumps air with a leather bellows operated by an apprentice. The apprentice pumps rhythmically 2 pumps, pause, 2 pumps, pause, creating airflow that intensifies heat without extinguishing flame. Too much air and the charcoal burns too fast, wasting fuel. Too little air and the fire cools below working temperature. The rhythm is learned through months of practice. The apprentice's arms move automatically, without thought, maintaining the exact pressure the blacksmith needs. When the iron glows white hot, the blacksmith removes it from the forge with long tongs. places it on an anvil, strikes it with a heavy hammer, not randomly, with specific intention. Each strike compresses the metal, forces out impurities, aligns the internal structure. The iron spreads under impact, elongating, flattening, taking shape. The blacksmith works quickly. Iron cools fast once removed from fire. Within 30 seconds, the white glow fades to orange. Within a minute, the orange fades to red. Within 2 minutes, the metal is too cool to shape. It must return to the forge. Reheated. Struck again. This cycle repeats dozens of times. Gradually, the rough ingot becomes a blade. Long and narrow. Tapered from thick base to thin edge. The blacksmith knows the proportions by eye. Knows how thick the base must be to survive mallet strikes without mushrooming. Knows how thin the edge must be to cut stone without folding. Knows the balance point where strength and sharpness coexist. The final shaping happens with files and grinding stones. The rough forged blade is too irregular for precision carving. It must be refined. The blacksmith drags a metal file along the edge, removing high spots, creating evenness. Then he moves to the grinding wheel, a large circular stone mounted on an axle, turned by foot pedal. He holds the blade against the spinning stone at a specific angle. Sparks fly. Metal heats from friction. The edge emerges gradually, not a knife edge, not sharpened yet, but the foundation of sharpness. The angle matters. For softer sandstone, the pale gray stone that yields easily, the edge angle should be around 25 to 30 degrees. This creates a sharp edge that bites aggressively into stone. For harder sandstone, the golden brown stone with tight grain, the edge angle should be closer to 35 to 40 degrees. This creates a stronger edge that resists chipping when it hits hard spots. The blacksmith grinds different chisels to different angles based on their intended use. He marks each chisel with small stamps on the tang, the thick base that fits into the wooden handle. One stamp for soft stone chisels. 2 stamps for hard stone chisels. You learn to check the stamps before selecting a tool for the day's work. But even a well-forged chisel needs constant maintenance. Daily maintenance. Sometimes twice daily if the work is aggressive. This is your responsibility, not the blacksmith's. The blacksmith makes tools. You keep them working. Sharpening happens at dawn, before the sun heats the stone and before the foreman assigns work. You arrive at your work area carrying your tools in a woven basket. 3 chisels of different widths. 1 wooden mallet with iron band around the head to prevent splitting. 2 whetstones, 1 coarse, 1 fine. A small clay pot of water. A rag. You kneel beside your stone. Set out the whetstones. Pour water onto the coarse stone until the surface glistens but does not puddle. The coarse stone removes metal quickly. It repairs damaged chips in the edge, rolls in the metal where impact was too hard, flat spots where sharpening has been neglected. You hold the chisel at the same angle the blacksmith ground it. 25 degrees for your primary chisel. 35 degrees for the hard stone chisel you rarely use but keep ready. You drag the edge across the stone in smooth strokes. Away from your body, not toward it. Never toward it. A slip could drive the edge into your palm. You count strokes. 10 on one side. Flip the chisel. 10 on the other side. This maintains symmetry. If you sharpen one side more than the other, the edge becomes lopsided. A lopsided edge pulls to one side when it cuts. What should be a straight line becomes a curve. What should be a flat plane becomes a wave. You cannot carve accurately with a lopsided chisel. So you count 10 and 10. Then 10 more and 10 more. Until the edge feels different under your thumb. Not sharp yet. Just refined. The major damage removed. The metal prepared for fine sharpening. You rinse the chisel. Wipe it dry. Switch to the fine whetstone. Pour water again, less this time, just enough to create a thin film. The fine stone works more slowly. It does not remove metal in large amounts. It polishes. Aligns the edge at a microscopic level. Creates the final sharpness that allows the chisel to bite into stone cleanly. You repeat the process. 15 strokes one side. 15 strokes the other. The sound changes as the edge becomes sharper. A whisper instead of a rasp. The feel changes too. The stone offers less resistance. The metal glides across it instead of dragging. You test sharpness not by cutting paper. There is no paper at Bayon, but by how the edge catches your thumbnail. You place your thumbnail against the chisel edge at a slight angle. If the edge catches immediately, biting into the nail without sliding, it is sharp enough. If it slides before catching, it needs more strokes on the fine stone. You never test sharpness by touching the edge with your fingertip. Fingers heal slowly when cut by sharp metal. Infection is common. A carver with infected hands cannot work. The thumbnail test is safer. Nails do not bleed. Do not infect. Do not prevent work. Once sharp, the chisel receives one final treatment. You wipe the edge with an oiled rag. Not heavily oiled. Just enough to leave a thin film of oil on the metal. This prevents rust. Sandstone dust contains moisture during the monsoon. Iron rusts when exposed to moisture. Rust weakens the edge, creates pitting, requires more aggressive sharpening to remove. The oil barrier stops this. It is invisible, too thin to interfere with carving but protective. Your chisels do not rust because you oil them daily. Other carvers' chisels rust because they do not. This entire process, coarse stone, fine stone, thumbnail test, oiling, takes perhaps 20 minutes. 20 minutes before you begin carving. 20 minutes that feel like delay when you are eager to work. 20 minutes that prevent hours of frustration when your chisel dulls mid-face and must be resharpened during work time. The experienced carvers sharpen without resentment. They sharpen with something close to meditation. The repetitive strokes. The sound of metal on stone. The gradual emergence of sharpness. The quiet anticipation of the day's work. The reminder that carving is not just striking stone. Carving is maintaining the tools that strike stone. And maintaining tools is part of the craft, not separate from it. Your mallet also requires maintenance, though less frequently. Wood wears differently than metal. The head of the mallet, the striking surface, develops dense and flat spots from repeated impact. These flat spots are not problems. They are evidence of use. But if the wood splits, the mallet becomes dangerous. A split mallet can shatter mid-swing, sending wooden shards into your hand or face. So the blacksmith wraps each mallet head with an iron band. A thin ring of metal heated and fitted around the wood while hot. As it cools, the iron contracts, gripping the wood tightly. This prevents splitting. Not forever, wood still fails eventually, but for months, sometimes years. When your mallet finally splits despite the iron band, you bring it to the blacksmith. He removes the band, discards the damaged wood, fits the band to a new wooden head. The iron band outlasts multiple wooden heads. Metal outlasts wood. Wood outlasts carvers. Tools outlast everyone. Tool theft is rare but not impossible. A chisel represents significant value. Iron is scarce. A well-maintained chisel can be sold, traded, or used by someone else. So carvers mark their tools. Small personal symbols carved into the wooden handles or stamped into the metal tangs. Your mark is 3 parallel lines, simple, recognizable, impossible to claim as accident. Every tool you own bears these lines. Every tool in your basket is instantly identifiable as yours. At the end of each day, you do not leave tools at your worksite. You carry them home. Store them inside your house, not outside. Other carvers do the same. Tools are too valuable to trust. The temple has locked storage for communal tools, large hammers, iron wedges, measuring sticks, but personal chisels are never stored communally. Too easy to borrow and never return. Too easy for quality tools to be swapped with damaged tools. The foreman does not police tool ownership. Carvers police it themselves. If someone is caught using another carver's marked tools, the consequence is not formal punishment. It is exile from the carver community. No one helps you. No one shares knowledge. No one lends tools when yours break. You work in isolation until you leave or until trust is somehow rebuilt. This social enforcement is more effective than any official penalty. Carvers depend on each other for techniques, advice, assistance with difficult cuts. Without community support, carving becomes exponentially harder. So theft is rare. And when it happens, it is dealt with swiftly by collective silence. Broken tools are not discarded. they are returned to the blacksmith for reforging. A chisel that snaps in half can become two smaller chisels. A chisel worn too short to hold can be combined with another short chisel melted together, reforged into one usable tool. Metal is never wasted. The blacksmith keeps a pile of broken tools near his forge. Bent chisels, cracked mallet bands, worn-out grinding wheels with metal fragments embedded in them. All of this feeds back into new tools eventually. The iron circulates, generation to generation, tool to tool. Nothing is lost, just transformed. Sometimes you wonder about the hands that held your chisel before you. What faces did they carve? What stone did they work? Did they sharpen as carefully as you do? Did they oil the edge? Did they test on their thumbnail? You will never know. The metal does not remember in ways you can read. It remembers only through the shape it has been worn into. The slight hollow in the tang from decades of handle friction. The thinning of the blade from countless sharpenings. The exact curve of the edge that no two chisels share because no two carvers sharpen identically. These are the only memories metal holds. Physical memories. Anonymous. Useful. Your children will inherit this chisel when you can no longer hold it. Not because you own it. Because you used it well. Maintained it. Sharpened it daily. Oiled it nightly. Marked it as yours but understood it was only temporarily yours. The chisel will outlast you. Will be sharpened by hands you will never see. Will carve stone you will never touch. Will remember you only as one more set of hands among many. One more layer of wear. One more generation of use. This is not sad. This is the nature of tools. They serve. They endure. They outlast. And the temple rises because tools outlast the people who use them. Because metal can be reforged but skill must be retaught. Because a good chisel used by 10 carvers creates 10 good faces. Because scarcity forces care. And care creates quality. And quality creates monuments that endure long after the tools themselves have been melted down and reforged into tools for some other project. Some other temple. Some other hands learning the same lessons you learned. The metal remembers nothing. But the stone remembers everything. And that is enough. You do not do every stage yourself. A face can pass through hands the way a piece of cloth passes through weavers. One worker roughs the planes quickly removing bulk, establishing volume. Another refines the geometry brow ridge, nose bridge, cheek slopes. The detail hand often the calmest, steadiest sets the eyelids, corners of the mouth, and the softness that makes stone feel alive. The Bayon is a state temple built in the reign of Jayavarman VII, and scholars emphasize the scale and organization required for such projects. You live inside that organization. Not as an abstract empire. As a daily workflow. Chapter 16 Measuring Calm, How You Make a Face Read from Below. A face on a tower is not meant for a viewer standing 1 arm's length away. It is meant for distance. So you carve for light, not for close inspection. The brow must cast a shadow. The nose must catch a narrow highlight. The lips must be readable when mist softens edges. And you do all of this while knowing scholars still debate what the faces represent: royal presence, bodhisattva compassion, or layered symbolism. So you do not carve a person, exactly. You carve an expression designed to hold many meanings. Calm is the safest meaning. The temple will have 200 faces when complete. Maybe more. Maybe fewer, depending on which towers the king decides to finish. But even 200 is an impossible number to keep consistent without system, without measurement, without memory built into wood and bamboo instead of just minds. The challenge is not making 200 identical faces. That would be easier. Identical means exact replication, same measurements, same angles, same everything. Machines could do that, if machines existed for this purpose. The challenge is making 200 faces that feel like they belong to the same presence. Like family members, not strangers. Similar enough to recognize kinship. Different enough to have individuality. Each face must read as calm. Each face must read as aware. Each face must read as Avalokiteśvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. But each face must also acknowledge that stone is individual, tower position is individual, carver skill is individual. Perfect uniformity is neither possible nor desirable. What is desired is harmony. Not sameness. Harmony. The system begins with templates. Not drawings. Not paintings. Physical wooden forms that can be held against stone and checked by hand. The master carver, the one who designed the first completed face, created these templates years ago, when the temple was still foundation and ambition. He carved them from hardwood. Teak, because teak resists warping when wet and does not crack when dry. 7 templates. 1 for the basic facial outline, the overall oval shape from crown of head to bottom of chin. 1 for eye placement, how far apart, how far from top of head, how far from nose bridge. 1 for nose projection, how far the nose extends from the face plane. 1 for mouth width from corner to corner, measured at the widest point of the lips. 1 for ear size and placement, though ears are often hidden by headdress. 1 for the smile curve, the exact angle of contentment, neither too wide nor too subtle. 1 for the proportions of forehead, eyes, nose, mouth, and chin, the vertical divisions that create balance. These templates are not detailed. They show proportions, not specifics. Skeleton, not skin. They tell you where features should sit and how large they should be relative to the whole. They do not tell you the exact curve of an eyelid or the precise thickness of a lip. Those details are left to individual carvers. Those details create the variation that prevents uniformity from becoming monotony. The templates are stored in the foreman's workshop. A small covered structure near the staging area. Carvers do not own templates. Carvers borrow them. You approach the workshop early in your work, when the rough block has been shaped into a basic head form but no features have been carved yet. You request the templates. The foreman retrieves them from pegs on the wall. Hands them to you one at a time. Watches as you hold them against your stone. You do not trace them. Tracing creates dependency you would need to return every time you forgot a measurement. Instead, you transfer the proportions to your stone using charcoal marks. Light marks. Guidelines that will be carved away as the face emerges. You mark where the eyes begin and end. Where the nose starts its projection. Where the mouth sits in relation to nose and chin. Where the ears attach, if they will be visible. These marks are not precise to the millimeter. They are approximate, close enough to maintain family resemblance, loose enough to allow individual interpretation. Once marked, you return the templates to the foreman. He checks your marks. Not judging quality that comes later. Just confirming that you transferred the proportions correctly. That your eyes are not too far apart. That your nose does not sit too high or too low. That your mouth width matches the template. If the marks are acceptable, he nods. If they are not, he adjusts them himself, using a charcoal stick to shift a line of fingers width up or down. No criticism. No explanation. Just correction. Then you begin carving. But templates alone are not enough. Because templates assume flat viewing. Assume you and the viewer will stand at the same level. Assume the face is seen straight on, not from below. This is not how Bayon works. The faces sit high. Most are carved into the upper section of towers that rise 3, sometimes 4 levels above the ground. 13 feet from base to top, on average. Some higher. A person standing at ground level looks up at these faces from 20 feet away, sometimes 30, depending on courtyard width. This creates distortion. Not in the stone. In perception. When you look up at a face from ground level, the proportions shift. The forehead appears larger because it is closer to your viewing angle. The chin appears smaller because it recedes away from you. The eyes, which should dominate, become less prominent. The mouth, which should be subtle, becomes almost invisible. The entire face compresses vertically in the viewer's perception. What looks balanced at eye level looks pinched from below. What looks calm at eye level looks stern from below. What looks aware at eye level looks distant from below. You must compensate for this distortion. Not by guessing. By calculation. By exaggeration that looks wrong at eye level but reads correctly from the ground. The compensation rules are taught, not discovered. The master carver learned them through trial. Through early faces that looked perfect while scaffolded but wrong when viewed from below after scaffold removal. Through adjustments made to later faces. through years of comparison between what was carved and what was seen. These rules are now part of training. Not written down. Passed along verbally, carver to carver, foreman to apprentice. Simple adjustments. Mathematical, almost. Rule 1. Enlarge upper features by roughly 1/5 compared to lower features. The forehead should be wider than the template suggests. The eyes should be larger. The space between eyes and hairline should be increased. This counteracts the visual compression that happens when looking up. The viewer's eye travels upward and encounters more face than they expect. The balance returns. Rule 2. Deepen all shadow cuts by at least 2 finger widths. What looks like sufficient depth at eye level becomes shallow from below. Light strikes differently when viewed at an angle. Shadows that read as definition at close range disappear into flatness from distance. So you carve deeper. The hollow beneath the cheekbone. The recessed area around the eyes. The undercut where the nose meets the face. These cuts look exaggerated when you stand on the scaffold. Look correct from the ground. Rule 3. Project the nose further than feels natural. A nose that extends 4 finger widths from the face plane at eye level should extend 6 finger widths for a face viewed from below. Otherwise, the nose reads as flat, as painted on rather than carved. The projection creates shadow. Shadow creates definition. Definition creates the sense that the face is three-dimensional, not a relief. This is crucial. These faces are not flat carvings on a wall. They are meant to feel present. Dimensional. Aware. Watching. A flat nose destroys that presence. Rule 4. Enlarge the lips. Not widening them. Thickening them. The upper lip should project slightly more than feels comfortable. The lower lip should curl subtly outward. This makes the smile visible from ground level. Without this exaggeration, the mouth becomes a line. The smile disappears. The calm expression reads as neutral, which is not the same as calm. Calm requires the smile. The smile requires exaggeration. Rule 5. Tilt the entire face downward by a few degrees. Not obviously. Not enough to make the face look like it is bowing. Just enough that the eyes seem to look at the ground rather than at the horizon. This creates the sensation of being watched. Of the face seeing you, not looking past you. The tilt is achieved by carving the back of the head slightly shorter than the front. By making the crown of the head sit slightly behind where the face sits. 2 fingers width difference from front to back is usually enough. This is invisible when you work on the scaffold. Visible only from below, where the angle matters. These rules are guidelines, not absolutes. Different tower heights require different adjustments. A face at 3 levels up needs more exaggeration than a face at 2 levels up. A face in a corner tower, where viewers can approach closely, needs less exaggeration than a face on a central tower surrounded by open courtyard. A face carved by a nervous apprentice needs foreman intervention to prevent under-exaggeration. A face carved by an overconfident veteran needs foreman intervention to prevent over-exaggeration. The foreman walks the ground level regularly. Not when scaffolds are still up, then he cannot see the full effect. After sections are completed and scaffolds are removed, he stands where future visitors will stand. Looks up. Evaluates. Sometimes a face reads correctly. Balanced. Calm. Aware. Watching without judgment. The foreman nods to himself. Makes a small charcoal mark on his record stick, a tally indicating success. The carver receives small acknowledgement. Not praise. Just continuation of work. Sometimes a face reads incorrectly. Eyes too small. Mouth invisible. Nose too flat. Forehead pinched. The calm expression becomes stiff. The awareness becomes distance. The presence becomes absence. The foreman makes a different mark on his record stick. The carver receives instruction. Not punishment. Just clarity about what went wrong and how to avoid it next time. If the error is minor, the face remains. 200 faces allow for some variation. Some imperfection. Not every face needs to be perfect. Every face just needs to be acceptable. If the error is major, if the face fundamentally fails to read as calm or aware, then the foreman has 3 options. 1. Send a more experienced carver to make corrections. This works if the error is fixable: mouth too narrow, can be widened; nose too flat, can be projected further; eyes too small, can be deepened. 2. Leave the face as lesson. Not to shame the carver. To remind everyone that viewing angle matters. To provide comparison what not to do. 3. Order the face recarved from rougher stage. This happens rarely. Stone is valuable. Time is limited. But if a face is prominent: central tower, main entrance, first thing visitors see, then failure is not acceptable. The carver does not recarve his own failure. Someone else takes over. Someone more experienced. The original carver receives reassignment. Lower tower. Less visible face. Opportunity to practice without consequence. As work progresses, reference faces become more important than templates. The first 3 completed towers serve as living templates. Not wooden forms in the foreman's workshop. Actual carved faces, weathered and finalized. You look at them regularly. Walk to the opposite courtyard during rest breaks. Stand at ground level. Look up. Study the faces that succeeded. Notice how their eyes catch light. How their noses project. How their mouths smile without smiling too much. How their foreheads dominate without overwhelming. These faces teach you more than templates can. Because these faces exist in the actual conditions yours will exist in. Viewed from below. Lit by sun moving across sky. Subject to shadow and highlight. Part of a tower, not isolated on a scaffold. You memorize these faces. Not consciously. By repeated exposure. Your hands learn what your eyes see. Your chisel begins moving in patterns that echo successful faces. Not copying. Absorbing principles. Understanding what correct means not as abstract concept but as physical reality. Sometimes you see other carvers standing where you stand, looking up at the same reference faces, learning the same lessons. This is encouraged. The temple is not competition between individual carvers. It is collective achievement. If you learn from the best faces and apply those lessons to your work, the temple benefits. If you hide your learning or work in isolation, the temple suffers. So carvers share space at the base of completed towers. Stand together, silently, looking up. Each seeing slightly different details. Each taking away slightly different lessons. But all learning from success. All calibrating their internal sense of correct against external reality. There is something humbling about standing at ground level looking up at faces you did not carve. You see quality you have not yet achieved. Proportions you have not yet mastered. Subtle curves you have not yet learned to create. But you also see proof that it is possible. That stone can become presence. That measurement and exaggeration and patient correction can produce something that feels alive. That 200 faces can coexist without chaos. That harmony is achievable. Not through uniformity. Through system. Through templates and rules and foreman oversight and reference faces and constant comparison. Through individual interpretation within collective framework. Through acceptance that you are not creating something entirely new. You are creating another iteration of something already defined. Your contribution is not originality. It is consistency. It is maintaining the vision across time and space and skill variation. It is being part of something larger than yourself. When tourists come centuries later, if tourists come, they will not see templates. They will not know about charcoal marks or viewing angle compensation or foreman corrections. They will see faces. Many faces. All similar. All different. All calm. All aware. All watching with the same basic expression but individual presence. They might say, these faces all look the same. Or they might say, each face is unique. Both statements are true. Both statements are incomplete. The truth is, these faces are harmonious. They exist in relationship to each other. Shaped by system. Refined by oversight. Unified by purpose. Not identical. Not random. Harmonious. You place your chisel against stone. You check the proportions one more time. Eyes, slightly larger than template suggested. Nose, projecting further than feels natural. Mouth, thickened to survive distance. Forehead, enlarged to counter viewing angle. Your marks are approved. Your compensation is calculated. Your reference faces are memorized. Now you carve. One cut at a time. Trusting the system. Trusting the measurements. Trusting that what looks wrong at eye level will look right from below. Trusting that your face will join the family of faces. Not as copy. Not as outlier. As kin. Similar enough to recognize. Different enough to matter. Calm enough to endure. Aware enough to watch over a city that does not yet know it needs watching. The chisel moves. The stone yields. The face emerges. One of 200. Individual. Collective. Harmonious. Precautions. You wear practical cloth, a wrapped lower garment, a simple top when needed, fabric that breathes in wet heat. You protect yourself less with gear and more with habits. Working early when stone is cooler. Wiping sweat before it blinds you. Keeping feet steady on damp planks. Wrapping hands when rope work is needed. Keeping dust out of eyes with cloth and water. Your real protection is the crew's routine. Scaffold checks. Tool checks. Water breaks that don't become long breaks. No one calls it safety culture. It's just the way you stay alive. You do not eat like a court official. You eat like a worker. Rice. Fish when it comes. Vegetables. Herbs. Fermented sauces. The site scale implies organized provisioning. Food and water have to reach crews steadily or the project fails. I'm not going to invent exact wages or pretend we have a single universal pay system. But the lived truth is clear. Large monument work creates predictable cycles, workdays, rations, obligations, and overseers who care about output. Your family plans around that reliability. A reliable work site can keep children fed in years when fields are uncertain. Payment at Bayon is not coins in your hand. It is rice in your basket. Measured. Reliable. Sufficient to feed a family if managed carefully. Insufficient to build wealth or accumulate surplus. The royal granaries supply the temple. Not directly from the king's personal stores. From local granaries fed by taxes collected from surrounding villages. Farmers pay their taxes in rice, a portion of each harvest delivered to collection points, weighed, recorded in the king's accounts. This rice flows to major projects. Bayon is a major project. So rice flows to Bayon. But not infinitely. Not without limits. The granary supervisors calculate carefully. How many carvers are working? How many laborers are hauling stone? How many guards are watching over the site? How many administrators are managing the logistics? Each category receives a different ration level based on skill, responsibility, physical demand. Carvers receive more than laborers. Laborers receive more than guards. Guards receive more than cleaners. This is not arbitrary hierarchy. This is caloric need combined with skill scarcity. Carving requires physical effort and mental precision. Training a carver takes years. Replacing a carver is difficult. So carvers are paid enough to keep them working. Not luxurious amounts. Enough. Your ration is collected weekly. Every 7th day, you walk to the distribution area near the staging yard. A long wooden table with baskets lined up. Each basket labeled with a carver's name or a marking symbol. Yours is 3 parallel lines, the same mark you use on your tools. The granary worker, a man who knows every carver by sight, has already filled your basket before you arrive. He does not measure in front of you. He measured earlier, using a clay vessel that holds exactly the standard ration amount. For a skilled finisher like you, the standard is 12 measures per week. Not heaping measures. Level measures. Struck flat with a wooden stick so no grain rises above the rim. 12 measures equals roughly 30 pounds of rice. This is calibrated to feed a family of 4, you, your wife, 2 children, with small margin for waste or loss. Not generous margin. Small margin. If rats get into your storage. If grain molds from moisture. If you accidentally spill while pouring. If any of these things happen, your family eats less that week. There is no supplemental ration for accidents. The granary has given you what it calculated you need. What you do with it is your responsibility. Different skill levels receive different amounts. Rougher carvers who shape the initial block but do not work on faces receive 10 measures per week. Less skilled work, less pay. Finishers, carvers like you who work on faces but do not make final decisions, receive 12 measures. Standard pay for standard skill. Detail hands, the most experienced carvers who handle eyes, mouths, noses, the features that define success or failure, receive 15 measures. Higher skill, higher pay, higher responsibility. The foreman receives 20 measures. Not because he carves. Because he manages. Because his decisions affect everyone. Because if he assigns the wrong person to the wrong stone, the entire system slows. The granary values decision-making more than physical labor. This irritates some carvers. They see the foreman standing while they kneel. They see him talking while they strike stone. They do not see the mental work. The constant calculation of who is ready for detail work. Who needs more practice on roughing. Which stone matches which carver's current skill level. Which face can tolerate imperfection. Which face cannot. This mental work is invisible. But it determines whether the temple progresses smoothly or chaotically. So the foreman receives 20 measures. And no one complains publicly, because complaining about payment results in reassignment to less desirable work. Family size affects rations slightly. If you have more than 2 children, you can request supplemental measures. Not automatically granted. You must demonstrate need. The granary supervisor visits your home, looks at your children, estimates their ages, their appetites, decides whether you genuinely need more or whether you are trying to accumulate surplus to trade. If approved, you receive 2 additional measures per week. Not per child. 2 measures total, regardless of whether you have 3 children or 5. The system assumes children eat less than adults. Also assumes older children contribute helping with household work, fetching water, assisting with tasks that free adults to focus on their primary labor. So the supplement is modest. Not proportional. Modest. Rice rations are more than food. They are currency. Medium of exchange. Unit of value. At Bayon, very little money circulates. Coins exist, small bronze pieces stamped with royal symbols, but most carvers never touch them. Coins are for merchants, for traders, for people who buy and sell across distances. Carvers do not buy and sell. Carvers trade. You trade rice for fish at the market near the temple. A measure of rice buys perhaps 8 small fish or 3 large fish. You trade rice for vegetables, a half measure for a basket of greens, a full measure for tubers that store well. You trade rice for cloth, 2 measures for a length of cotton fabric sufficient for a simple garment. You trade rice for oil, for salt, for spices that make food palatable when eaten daily. The exchange rates are not fixed. They fluctuate based on season, availability, demand. During the dry season, fish are abundant. Your rice buys more fish. During the monsoon, fish are scarce. Your rice buys fewer. You learn to trade strategically. Stock up on dried fish during the dry season. Store vegetables when they are cheap. Wait to buy cloth until after harvest, when everyone has surplus and prices drop. This requires planning. Requires understanding cycles. Requires restraint when you see something you want but know prices will improve if you wait. Your wife manages this better than you do. She visits the market. She negotiates trades. She knows which vendors give fair measures and which shortchange. She knows when to buy and when to wait. You carve stone. She manages the household economy. Both roles are essential. Both require skill. Neither is simple. Rice storage is a skill itself. 30 pounds of rice per week sounds like abundance. It is not. Rice is bulky. Rats love it. Moisture ruins it. You store rice in clay jars with fitted lids. Not one large jar. If one jar fails, you lose everything. 3 smaller jars, each holding roughly 10 pounds. The jars sit on wooden platforms raised off the ground. This prevents moisture from seeping up from the earth. You check the jars daily. Look for rat droppings. Smell for mold. Feel the grain with your hand. If it feels damp, you spread it in the sun to dry before returning it to the jar. Once grain molds, it is inedible. You cannot trade moldy rice. You cannot ask for replacement rations because you stored poorly. The loss is yours to absorb. Your family eats less that week. Seasonal work cycles affect rations. During the dry season November through March the full carving crew works. 50, sometimes 60 carvers on site simultaneously. Progress is fast. Rations are distributed reliably every 7th day. During the monsoon June through October the crew shrinks. Heavy rain makes detailed carving difficult. Stone becomes too soft. Scaffolding becomes unsafe. Many carvers are released to work on other tasks. Rice farming in their home villages. Road repair. Maintenance on older temples. Only the essential crew remains at Bayon during the monsoon. Perhaps 20 carvers. You are usually among them, because you are a finisher. Finishers stay because there is always finish work that can be done even in rain. Roughers leave because rough work is delayed until dry season. If you are sent home for the monsoon, your rations stop. Not reduced. Stop. The granary does not pay people who are not working on site. You return to your village. You work your own land if you have land. You take temporary work if you can find it. You live on whatever surplus you saved during the dry season. If you saved no surplus, if you consumed every measure of rice you received, then the monsoon months are lean. This teaches carvers to save. Not through instruction. Through experience. Through hunger during the first monsoon after you started carving. Through never wanting to experience that hunger again. Non-cash benefits exist but are inconsistent. Tool access is guaranteed while you work. If your chisel breaks and you cannot afford a new one, the temple provides one. Not a gift. A loan. You are expected to return it if you leave, or pay for it through reduced rations if you keep it. Shelter is provided for carvers who live too far from the temple to walk daily. Simple wood and thatch structures near the staging area. Communal sleeping spaces with mats on raised platforms. No privacy. No comfort beyond basic protection from rain. But free. If you live close enough to walk, you do not use this shelter. You go home nightly, see your family, sleep in your own house. Medical care is available for work injuries. A temple physician treats cuts, infections, broken bones caused by falling from scaffolding. This treatment is free because the temple caused the injury. But medical care for illnesses unrelated to work, fevers, stomach problems, infections from home are your responsibility. The physician may treat you if he has time. Or he may not. Or he may treat you but expect payment in rice. The system is inconsistent. Depends on the physician's mood, his workload, his relationship with you. You cannot rely on it. There are rumors of completion bonuses. When the temple finishes, when the last face is carved, the last tower completed, the king performs the consecration ceremony. There will be extra rice distributed to all who worked. How much extra, no one knows. Some carvers say double rations for a month. Others say triple rations for a week. Others say the rumor itself is false, invented to keep people working. The foreman does not confirm or deny. He just says, work well, and you will be cared for. This ambiguity is probably intentional. If the bonus were guaranteed and specific, carvers might delay work to extend their employment. If the bonus were definitely non-existent, carvers might lose motivation. The rumor keeps people working at steady pace without certainty of reward. This is effective management. Possibly cynical, but effective. Economic pressure exists but is subtle. If your work quality declines, if faces you carve require excessive correction, if you miss too many days, if the foreman loses confidence in your ability, your ration may be reduced. Not officially. Not announced. You simply receive 11 measures instead of 12. Or 10 measures instead of 12. The granary worker does not explain. The reduction is message enough. Work better, or the reduction continues. Work much worse, or you are dismissed entirely. Dismissed carvers receive no final bonus. No recommendation letter. No assistance finding other work. They simply stop appearing on the roster. Their name disappears from the distribution list. Their basket is removed from the table. They go home and do not return. This rarely happens. Most carvers understand the silent signals. A reduced ration is warning. A second reduction is final warning. By the third week, either you have improved or you have chosen to leave before being officially dismissed. The system allows dignity in departure. No public shaming. No dramatic firing. Just gradual economic pressure that makes continuation impossible. You carry the week's rice home in a woven basket balanced on your shoulder. 30 pounds is heavy. Not impossibly heavy, but noticeable. By the time you reach home, 20 minutes walk from the temple, your shoulder aches. Your neck is stiff. Your children see you coming. They run to meet you. They know the rice basket means food for the week. Means security. Means their father's work is valued enough that the king's granaries continue to pay him. Your wife takes the basket. Transfers the rice to storage jars. Calculates meals for the week. Decides what can be traded, what must be kept, what needs supplementing with purchases. She does this math in her head. No writing. No formal calculation. Just practiced estimation built over years of managing household resources. You do not think about this calculation while you carve. But it is always present. In the back of your mind. The knowledge that your hammer strikes translate into rice. Rice translates into food. Food translates into family survival. This is not romantic. This is not glorious. This is basic economics. Work earns payment. Payment enables life. Life enables work. The cycle continues as long as the temple needs you and you remain capable. Some carvers resent this system. They see the king's wealth, the gold on the temples, the elaborate ceremonies, the vast resources mobilized for religious monuments, and wonder why carvers receive only rice. Why not coins? Why not bonuses guaranteed in advance? Why not higher rations that allow saving? Why not security beyond the current week? These questions have no good answers. Or perhaps they have answers carvers do not want to hear. The system pays just enough to keep people working but not enough to give them independence. If rations were generous, carvers might accumulate enough surplus to stop working. To choose when and whether to carve. To have leverage in negotiations with foremen. The system prevents this. Not through cruelty. Through calibration. You are paid enough to survive but not enough to escape. This ensures steady labor supply. Ensures the temple progresses on schedule. Ensures individual carvers remain dependent on continued employment. You do not resent this openly. Resentment accomplishes nothing. The system exists whether you approve or not. You can work within it or refuse it. Refusal means leaving. Leaving means finding other work. Other work likely pays less and respects your skill less. So you stay. You collect your 12 measures weekly. You carve faces. You maintain your tools. You carry the rice home. You watch your wife manage the household. You see your children eat. And you know that your labor, invisible to future generations, anonymous in the collective achievement, translates into survival. Not wealth. Not glory. Survival. Which is enough. Has to be enough. Because the alternative is walking away from the only thing you know how to do well. And the stone needs carving. And the faces need finishing. And the temple needs completion. And your family needs rice. So you return each morning. Sharpen your chisel. Strike stone. Carve calm into faces that will outlast the economic system that paid for them. And you carry that weight home in your body. In your tired shoulders. In your aching back. In the rice basket that represents everything you have earned and everything you are worth to the king's grand project. 30 pounds per week. Heavy enough to matter. Light enough to carry. Just barely. Wood. The jungle does not attack you like a monster. It wears things down. Rain swells wood. Ropes loosen. Moss spreads. Stone stays. Wood changes. So the calamities that matter are often small. A plank that softens. A ladder rung that shifts. A knot that slips when wet. You don't dramatize it. You check. And the checking becomes part of the episode's calm rhythm. Touch the rope. Test the plank. Tighten the tie. Listen to the creak. Then return to tapping stone. A temple like the Bayon is not a private hobby. It is a state statement. The Bayon's construction under Jayavarman VII is widely emphasized as a central, late Angkor state project with enormous resource demands. You feel that as pressure without hearing a single official speech. Pressure sounds like, finish this tower section before rains deepen. Do not waste blocks. Keep the face consistent with the others. The empire's needs arrive as deadlines, not as philosophy. When materials are valuable, problems appear. Not always violent. Often subtle. A chisel goes missing. A rope is borrowed and not returned. A smaller stone is swapped for a stronger one in a hidden place. A tired worker hits too hard and pretends it was the stone's fault. So protection is mostly accounting and attention. Tools wrapped and counted. Foremen watching quietly. Crews responsible for their own gear. And you detail hand on a face learn that craftsmanship is also vigilance. Not anxious vigilance. Just steady awareness. Heal overnight. At home, your wife sees your hands before you speak. Stone dust in lines of skin. A bruise forming where a tool slipped. A shoulder sore from leaning into the scaffold all day. Children learn your job by watching what it does to you. They learn why you wash slowly. Why you eat in silence at first. Why your eyes like darkness after a day of glare off pale stone. Your wife mends cloth. She helps keep your tools dry. She keeps children from touching what can cut them. In a world of big temples, the household is still the smallest and most important unit of survival. Before sleep, you do the invisible tasks. Sharpen. Wipe. Wrap. Set tools where your hand will find them in the morning. Because iron is precious and work must continue, Angkorian industries and iron supply networks existed to support tools for monuments and agriculture, and that reality makes tool care part of your job identity. A dull chisel costs time. A broken handle costs injury. So you prepare. Then you let the body rest. Morning again. Mist again. The plank cool underfoot. Your chisel touches the stone. Tap. The sound is the same as yesterday, and that sameness is comforting. Because the face does not need hurry. It needs steadiness. And you are paid socially, economically, quietly for steadiness. Tap. 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 The jungle holds its breath around the sound. And you begin shaping calm into stone again. You don't carve an eye. You carve a plane that will become an eye. This is the secret that keeps the work calm. You never try to finish the whole face at once. You break it into simple surfaces. A cheek is a slope. A brow is a ridge. A nose is a bridge with two gentle sides. You tap the chisel along the plane. Not deep. Not dramatic. Just enough to flatten a high point. Tap, tap, tap. Then you brush away dust. And you look. Because looking is half the job. You step back on the scaffold. Not far. Just enough to see how shadow falls. A face on a tower is read by people standing below, in shifting light mist, sun, and monsoon cloud. So you check for what will read. A brow that casts a clean, steady shadow. A nose ridge that catches a narrow highlight. Cheeks that don't collapse into flatness. You do this slowly, because rushing makes you chase errors. And chasing errors is loud work. Quiet work comes from correct steps taken early. You keep more than one chisel at hand. One with a broader edge for flattening. One narrower for defining a crease. You don't use the fine edge when you're angry or tired. You use it when your hand is steady. This is not superstition. It's protection. A fine edge bites quickly and chips easily. A broad edge is forgiving. So the day has a rhythm of tools. Broad edge for shaping. Narrow edge for truth. A fierce mouth is easy. Sharp corners, deep cuts. But the Bayon face asks for calm. Calm is harder. Calm requires restraint. You approach the mouth as a gentle volume first, like a small hill. Then you define the edges lightly. Not thin. Not sharp. A mouth that reads from below should feel settled, not tense. You stop often to check. Because one extra strike can turn serenity into a grimace. And your job is not to impress someone up close. Your job is to keep the whole tower's expression consistent. Eyes are not drilled out. They are formed from shadow. A shallow line becomes an eyelid. A slight ridge becomes the upper lid's weight. A soft depression becomes the socket's depth. You carve the eyes with patience because eyes catch attention immediately. Even when a traveler can't explain what the face means, they feel watched. You don't chase realism. You chase presence. The nose is the most fragile part of the face. It projects. It catches light. It chips if you strike too hard. So you carve it with extra caution, like walking a narrow plank. Tap, brush, step back, look. Tap, brush, look again. The nose ridge is defined gradually. You don't force it. You let the stone decide how fast it will accept precision. In humidity, dust behaves differently. It clumps. It sticks to sweat. It fills shallow cuts and hides what you've done. So you keep a small brush close. You clear dust constantly. Not because you're tidy. Because dust lies. It makes a plane look flatter than it is. It makes a crease look deeper than it is. Clean surface means honest feedback. Honest feedback means fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes mean you keep your job. Midday arrives like a weight. The stone warms. The wood warms. The air turns thick. Sweat runs down your back and collects at the waistband. This is the hour when accidents happen. Not because workers are foolish. Because bodies get tired. So you take water in small sips. You pause to wipe your hands. You check your footing. You check your rope ties. You do not rush just to finish this one thing. You finish tomorrow, if needed. A broken wrist ends more work than a late cheek line ever will. Sometimes the sky changes quickly. A wind arrives. The leaves begin to move. The first drops hit stone and darken it instantly. Rain on sandstone changes everything. The surface becomes slick. Dust becomes paste. Footing becomes uncertain. So the crew shifts into a practiced routine. Tools are wrapped. Wood planks are checked. Loose baskets are moved under cover. No one argues. Rain does not negotiate. You climb down slowly. You wait. And you let the temple hold the storm. Because the face does not need to be finished today. The face needs to survive the season. After the storm, the stone is cooler. Darker where it's wet. The air smells of crushed leaves and damp soil. You return to the scaffold when it's safe. You touch the face surface lightly. The stone feels slightly softer, not actually softer, but more receptive in your mind because the heat is gone. You carve differently now. Lighter taps. More brushing. More checking. Rain changes the pace. And pace is part of craftsmanship. Moss grows in places you don't want it. In corners. In shallow grooves. On ledges that hold water. It makes the temple look ancient even when it is still new. You accept that nature is always working. Your job is to carve the face. Nature's job is to soften it, stain it, and give it a second life. So you don't fight moss with anger. You clear what interferes with carving. You leave what is harmless. Because no carver wins a war against humidity. You only work inside it. Tools are valuable. Metal is valuable. Rope is valuable. A missing chisel isn't just a personal inconvenience. It slows a team. So the crew treats tools like a shared responsibility. At day's end. Chisels counted. Mallets checked. Tool wraps tied. Storage area closed. This is how the project protects itself. Not with drama. With routine. And routine is soothing, even when it's strict. At home, the meal is not a reward. It's maintenance. Rice, fish when possible, greens, herbs, fermented flavors that make simple food satisfying. Your children talk more than you do. You listen. Your wife reads your fatigue without asking. She sets water where your hand will find it. She watches you chew slowly. She knows you're measuring tomorrow already. How your shoulder feels. Whether your fingers cramp. Whether the heat left you dizzy. This is family life in a work world. Not sentimental. Protective. Stone dust doesn't disappear when you stop working. It stays in nail beds, in hairline, in cloth folds. So you wash. Not like a ritual. Like a necessity. Your wife shakes out your garment. She mends a tear near the hem. A small repair that keeps you decent at work tomorrow. And you understand something quietly. Your craft depends on invisible labor at home too. In humid climates, sickness comes and goes. Fevers. Coughs. Skin infections from tiny cuts filled with dust. You don't panic about every ache. But you respect illness because it steals strength. And strength is safety on scaffolds. So when a worker looks pale, crews adjust. They give them ground tasks. They don't tease. They don't dramatize. They protect the project by protecting the person. Before you stop, you look one more time. From below, if possible. Or from the scaffold's far edge. You don't ask, is it perfect? You ask, is it calm? Does the brow read as settled? Does the mouth rest naturally? Do the cheeks catch light the way the other faces do? If the answer is yes, you stop. Stopping at the right time is part of being a professional. Then you wrap your tools. You step down. You leave the tower in mist and quiet. And the face remains unfinished, but steady, waiting for tomorrow's gentle tapping. The roughing hand removes stone quickly. Your work now is different. You remove less. You decide more. Finishing is a paradox. The lighter your strikes, the more important they become. You use a broader edge to soften tool marks. Then you shift to smaller edges to refine transitions. Brow into temple. Nose bridge into cheek. Upper lid into socket. You are not trying to polish it like metal. You are trying to make the surface consistent so it catches light evenly, so the face reads calm in mist and sun. Each tap is quieter now. Tap. Brush. Tap. The face becomes less carved and more present. Sharp edges create tension. Even if the face is smiling, sharp edges make it feel harsh. So you soften. Not to blur. To calm. You round a lip edge slightly. You reduce a cheek ridge. You soften the corner of the nostril where a careless chip might start later. This is how a face becomes timeless. Not by being dramatic, but by being gentle in its geometry. You are carving one face among many. Consistency matters. A single face that looks too different breaks the tower's mood. So you compare. Not obsessively. Practically. You glance at the neighboring face. You note its brow depth. Its mouth width. Its nose angle. Then you bring your own work closer to that pattern. A state project depends on repetition done with skill, many hands aiming for one visual language. You don't call it branding. You call it the style of the site. A very smooth face can glare in sun. A very rough face traps moss and stains quickly. So you aim for a middle texture. A texture that holds shadow gently. A texture that does not invite water to sit. You brush away dust and feel the surface with fingertips. You trust touch. Touch notices what eyes miss. A tiny ridge. A small wobble in a plane. A place where the chisel skipped. You correct these quietly. One tap at a time. At some point, your chisel stops biting cleanly. Not dramatically. Just subtly. The sound changes. The edge drags instead of cutting. This is where professionals stop. You sharpen. You reseat the handle. You wrap the tool again. Research emphasizes the importance of iron production and tool supply in the Angkor world, which makes tool maintenance a daily reality rather than a hobby. Then you return to stone. The chisel bites cleanly again. And the work becomes easier. An overseer visits. Not to shout. To look. They step onto the scaffold, or they stand below and tilt their head. They say little. Sometimes they say nothing. But their silence is not emptiness. It is evaluation. They are checking consistency. Checking progress. Checking whether your team will keep pace with the season. A temple like this is a statement of power and devotion, built under Jayavarman VII, and the scale implies structured oversight. You keep working. Steady. Because the best response to oversight is calm competence. A mallet goes missing. Not stolen in a dramatic way. Just, gone. It could be a mistake. A swap. A worker who borrowed it and forgot. But missing tools create suspicion. Suspicion slows work. So the foreman uses procedure. Work pauses briefly. Tool bundles are checked. The storage corner is searched. People are asked plainly, not accused loudly. Eventually the mallet is found wrapped in cloth among someone else's tools, an honest confusion. The foreman doesn't punish. They reinforce the habit. Tools return to your bundle. Your bundle stays tied. Counts happen at day's end. That is how large sites stay functional. By reducing chaos without raising voices. The scaffold creaks differently in humidity. A knot looks tighter when wet, looser when dry. So you check again. Hands on rope. Foot on plank. You test weight. You adjust. No one applauds safety. But safety is the reason you get to carve tomorrow. The scaffold beneath your feet is not permanent. It is temporary architecture. Necessary but expendable. Built to hold weight for months, then dismantled when its purpose is complete. But while it stands, it must be trusted absolutely. Because a scaffold that fails kills. Not occasionally. Reliably. Every collapse is fatal for someone. Bayon scaffolds are built from two materials. Bamboo for speed and lightness. Hardwood for strength and durability. Never only bamboo, it flexes too much under heavy load, making carvers feel unstable even when technically safe. Never only hardwood, it is scarce, expensive, slow to build. Always a hybrid. Hardwood for the primary vertical supports, the thick poles that run from ground to the working height. Bamboo for the horizontal platforms and cross-bracing. This combination balances cost, availability, and structural needs. The vertical supports are the foundation of everything. They must bear not just their own weight but the weight of platforms, tools, stone blocks waiting to be carved, and the carvers themselves. A single vertical pole might support 300 pounds or more. 4 poles together support over 1,000 pounds. If one pole fails, the others must compensate immediately or the entire structure collapses. So the poles are chosen carefully. Not any hardwood. Specific species known for strength and resistance to rot. Teak when available, though teak is expensive and usually reserved for royal buildings. Ironwood when teak is not available, denser, harder, more resistant to insects and moisture. Each pole is inspected before installation. Not just visually. By striking it with a mallet and listening to the sound. A clear, solid tone means the interior is sound. A hollow or muffled tone means internal rot or damage. These poles are rejected. Not repaired. Rejected. Because rot spreads. What seems minor today becomes structural failure in 3 months. The poles are sunk into the ground. Not laid on surface. Sunk. A hole is dug 2 feet deep for lower scaffolds, 3 feet deep for higher ones where the load is greater. The base of the pole is placed into the hole. Stones are packed around it, wedged tightly to prevent shifting. Then earth is packed back in, compressed by repeated tamping with a heavy wooden tool. The pole should not move when pushed. Should not rock when leaned against. Should feel as stable as a tree rooted in place. If it moves at all, the packing is insufficient. The earth is removed, repacked, retamped. This process repeats until the pole feels immovable. Horizontal bamboo platforms are lashed to the vertical poles. Not nailed. Not pegged. Lashed with rope made from plant fiber. Nails would split the bamboo. Pegs would require drilling holes that weaken the structure. Rope allows flexibility. The scaffold can shift slightly with wind or weight without breaking. But lashing must be done correctly. Incorrectly tied rope fails under load. The rope is wetted before lashing. Dry rope is stiff, difficult to knot tightly. Wet rope is pliable, can be pulled hard without snapping. More importantly, wet rope shrinks as it dries. What feels tight when wet becomes tighter over days as moisture evaporates. This creates pressure that increases over time, holding better than rope lashed dry. The knot pattern matters. Not any knot. a specific pattern taught to scaffold builders and tested through generations of trial and failure. The rope wraps around both the vertical pole and the horizontal bamboo in a figure-8 pattern. Crosses itself twice. Pulls tight. Loops back for security. Then ties off with a square knot that will not slip under load. The builder pulls the rope hard while tying. Pulls until the rope creaks. Pulls until his hands ache. This is not excessive. This is necessary. Loose lashing means shifting platform. Shifting platform means instability. Instability means carvers refuse to climb. Or climb reluctantly, working badly because fear distracts them. Every connection point is tested before the scaffold is approved for use. The foreman climbs first. Not to carve. To test. He climbs to each level. Stands on each platform. Bounces slightly, putting weight on his toes, then heels, then toes again. Feels for movement. Listens for creaks. If a platform flexes too much, he orders additional support, another bamboo cross brace, another rope lashing. If a rope looks frayed, he orders replacement before anyone works above it. If a vertical pole seems to lean even slightly, he orders the base repacked. These checks are not optional. They are mandatory before any carver is allowed to climb. Because the foreman knows something every experienced builder knows, small problems compound quickly. A rope that is 90% secure feels secure but fails under unusual stress. A pole that leans 5 degrees feels stable but doubles the load on adjacent poles. A platform that flexes 2 inches under normal load flexes 4 inches when a carver stumbles. The margin for error is thin. So problems are fixed before they become failures. Monsoon season changes everything. During the dry season, scaffolds are relatively stable. Wood dries. Rope tightens. The ground stays firm. But when the rains come, when water falls daily for months, everything softens. Wood absorbs moisture, swells, becomes heavier. Rope absorbs moisture, stretches, loses tension. The ground softens, allowing pole bases to shift. Bamboo platforms develop slick surfaces where algae grows. Metal tools rust if left overnight, creating orange stains that make gripping difficult. The scaffold that was safe in November becomes questionable in July. Daily inspection becomes non-negotiable during the monsoon. Not weekly. Daily. Every morning before climbing, the foreman or his appointed inspector walks the base of each scaffold. Pushes vertical poles. Feels for movement that was not there yesterday. Looks at the ground around the base. Soft earth means water has saturated the soil. Saturated soil means the pole might be shifting even if it feels solid when pushed. He climbs to the first platform. Stands on it. Bounces. Listens for creaks that sound different than yesterday. A scaffold develops a voice, a specific pattern of sounds it makes under load. Experienced inspectors know these voices. A new creak means something has changed. Something has loosened or shifted or begun failing. Even if it looks fine. Even if it still holds weight. The new sound is warning. Rope inspection focuses on two danger signs. Fraying individual fibers breaking free from the twisted bundle. Fraying starts small. A few loose threads. Easy to ignore. But fraying compounds. Once fibers begin breaking, adjacent fibers carry more load, stress increases, more fibers break. Within days, a minor fray becomes a major weakness. Within weeks, the rope snaps. The inspector looks at every lashing point. Runs his hand along the rope, feeling for rough spots where fibers stick out. If fraying is minor, just a few threads, he wraps that section with fresh rope, binding the weak spot. If fraying is extensive, visible thinning, multiple fibers broken, he replaces the entire rope. Not just the frayed section. The entire rope. Because stress that caused fraying in one spot exists throughout the rope. Replacing part of it is temporary fix. Replacing all of it is permanent solution. The second danger sign is looseness. Rope that was tight yesterday but feels loose today. This happens during monsoon because moisture softens the fiber, allows stretch. Loose rope means platform can shift. Shifting platform means carvers step wrong, tools slide, weight redistributes unpredictably. Loose ropes are retied. Not tightened by pulling harder, the old knot has already lost tension. Untied completely. Retied wet. Allowed to dry into new tightness. This takes time. An hour to retie a single platform properly. 3 hours to retie an entire scaffold level. The work must be done during daylight when the inspector can see clearly. Cannot be rushed. Rushed rope work fails. Failed rope work kills. The greatest danger is not sudden failure. It is gradual failure that no one notices until too late. A vertical pole that leans 1 degree more each week. Imperceptible day to day. Obvious only when measured against a reference point. The inspector uses a plumb line, a weight on a string held next to the pole. If the pole is perfectly vertical, the string runs parallel to it. If the pole leans, the string diverges. Even 1 finger's width of divergence at head height means the base has shifted significantly. The pole must be reset. The scaffold must be unloaded, tools removed, platforms cleared. The pole must be dug out, repositioned, repacked. Then retested. This takes a full day of work. Delays carving. Frustrates everyone. But it prevents collapse. And preventing collapse is worth any delay. Some carvers fear heights. Not all. But some. They climb reluctantly. Grip the vertical poles tightly. Move slowly, testing each step before committing weight. This fear is not weakness. This fear is survival instinct. The human body knows falling is dangerous. The mind creates fear to prevent falling. This fear must be managed, not eliminated. Eliminated fear leads to carelessness. Managed fear leads to caution. The foreman does not mock carvers who fear heights. He assigns them to lower platforms where the fall distance is shorter, or to ground level work where falling is not a risk. Forcing a terrified carver to work 3 levels up guarantees bad work and possible accident. Better to assign work appropriate to each person's comfort. Better to have 50 carvers working confidently at various heights than forcing all of them to the highest platforms regardless of fear. Scaffold dismantling is almost as dangerous as construction. When a tower section is complete, when faces are carved, details finalized, foreman has approved the work, the scaffold must come down. This is not simply reversing construction. This is controlled deconstruction. The top level is removed first. Platforms unloaded. Bamboo poles untied. Ropes coiled and saved for reuse. Vertical supports left standing until all horizontal elements are removed. Then the vertical supports are removed level by level, working downward. The workers doing this are not carvers. They are specialized scaffold builders who understand structural principles. They know which rope to untie first, which pole to remove without collapsing adjacent sections, which platform can be pulled loose and which must be gently lowered. This work requires strength and understanding. A carver might know how to work on a scaffold. A scaffold builder knows how to dismantle one without killing anyone. Sometimes scaffolds fail despite precautions. A hidden rot inside a hardwood pole that inspection did not detect. A sudden storm that soaks the ground overnight, causing pole bases to shift. A carver who steps on a frayed rope that looked secure but was not. These failures are rare, not non-existent. Rare. When a scaffold fails, the investigation is immediate. The foreman examines the failure point. The scaffold builders examine the materials. The king's engineers examine the design if the failure suggests systemic problem rather than isolated incident. If the failure was preventable, if an inspector missed obvious danger signs, the inspector faces consequences. Not execution. Not imprisonment. Reassignment to different work. Loss of trust. Loss of authority. In a system where reputation determines responsibility, losing trust is severe punishment. If the failure was not preventable, if a hidden flaw or unusual weather caused something no inspection could have caught, the system adjusts. Inspection procedures are refined. Material requirements are strengthened. Safety margins are increased. The temple learns from failure. Incorporates lessons into future construction. The next scaffold is safer because the previous one failed. You stand on the platform 3 levels above the ground. 20 feet of empty air beneath your feet. 20 feet held up by hardwood and bamboo and rope. You do not think about this constantly. If you did, you could not work. Fear would paralyze you. but you never forget it completely. You step carefully. You do not lean your full weight against the outer edge. You keep your tools organized so you do not need to reach suddenly and lose balance. You trust the scaffold because it has been inspected. But you do not trust it blindly. You notice when a rope looks different than yesterday. You report when a platform feels less stable than last week. You do not assume someone else will notice. You are responsible for your own safety as much as the inspector is. When the workday ends, you climb down carefully. Not rushing despite fatigue. Not distracted despite thinking about home, food, rest. The same attention you gave the climb up, you give the climb down. Because most falls happen at the end of the day. When muscles are tired. When focus has drifted. When the mind has already left the scaffold even though the body has not. You place each foot deliberately. Grip each pole firmly. Transfer weight gradually from one level to the next. Until your feet touch ground. Until the temporary architecture is above you instead of beneath you. Until you can breathe normally again without the background awareness that you are suspended in air by materials that are strong enough. Probably. Usually. If inspected properly and maintained constantly, and if no hidden flaw exists, and if the weather cooperates, and if nothing unexpected happens. The scaffold stands overnight. Tomorrow you will climb it again. Tomorrow the inspector will check it again. Tomorrow it will hold you again. Probably. Usually. And that probability is why you check it again tomorrow. And why the inspector checks it again tomorrow. And why no one ever assumes the scaffold that was safe yesterday is automatically safe today. Because temporary architecture requires permanent vigilance. Because falling kills. Because the faces you carve are worth the risk. But only if the risk is managed. Never if the risk is ignored. So you check. And check again. And tomorrow you will check again. Because the scaffold is not permanent. But while it stands, it must be trusted. And trust requires verification. Daily verification. Without exception. Without shortcuts. Without assumptions. This is the price of working high above the ground. Not courage. Caution. Constant, careful, exhausting caution. That keeps you alive. That keeps the scaffold standing. That keeps the temple rising. One face at a time. One inspection at a time. One day at a time. Until the work is done and the scaffold comes down and you walk away intact. Ready to build another scaffold. For another tower. For another face. For another test of whether materials and skill and caution are sufficient to prevent falling. They usually are. Usually. And you check it again tomorrow. There is a sound you learn to recognize. The sound of a finishing strike. Not the heavy crunch of bulk removal. A lighter, higher tap. A controlled bite. Tap, Tap, tap. It's almost musical. And it's the part the listener can fall into most easily, because it has rhythm without tension. At home, your wife repairs cloth. Children practice small tasks with their hands, twisting fiber, tying knots, scraping a cooking pot clean. In a craft world, children grow up watching hands work. They learn that skill is not a miracle. It is repetition. Outside, insects sing in the damp night air. The jungle has its own steady sound, like the temple does. Everything is rhythmic here. Everything repeats. Someone in the crew is feverish. They work slower. They are given ground tasks. No one calls them weak. Weakness is a temporary condition. Everyone has seen it. And because stone work is dangerous, the crew adapts. This is the calm morality of labor. Protect the person, protect the project. When the state is stable, materials arrive. When the state is strained, materials tighten. Iron becomes precious. Rope is reused. Wood is patched. Food feels thinner. You may not understand court politics. You don't need to. You feel politics as supply. You feel it as deadlines. You feel it as tension in overseers' faces. But you keep your own face calm. Because a calm craftsman is valuable during unstable times. Angkor's monuments don't only depict gods and kings. They depict ordinary life too: boats, markets, labor. Your own job is not always shown, but your world is. This matters because it tells you something comforting. Even in great power projects, daily life is still the foundation. Your hands belong to that foundation. Rain returns. A sudden sheet. The stone darkens instantly. Your work stops. Not because you're lazy. Because wet stone is slippery. Wet scaffolds kill. So you wrap tools. You climb down. You wait. Waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is the price of survival. And survival is required for craftsmanship. After rain, mist rises again. The face looks different in mist. Softer. Older. As if it has already lived through centuries. You see how water will shape it later. How moss will settle. How streaks will form. And you accept that the temple will continue to change long after you stop carving. That is not sad. It is normal. Stone holds time. You don't finish the Bayon. No one person does. You finish a segment. A plane. An eyelid. A mouth edge. Then you stop. You wrap the chisel. You tie the cloth. You count. And the face remains, calm and half-emerged, waiting for tomorrow. Return to the scaffold in your mind. The plank is steady. The air is cool. Mist softens the edges of the tower. You lift the chisel. Tap. Brush. Tap. The sound is small. The world is large. Tap. Brush. Tap. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm. In. Out. Tap. Brush. The face becomes calmer not because you rush, but because you do not. Imagine the moss-covered face in the mist. It doesn't judge. It doesn't demand. It simply exists. A calm presence carved from countless small taps. And you listener, worker, dreamer can rest the same way. One breath at a time. One quiet moment at a time. Until wakefulness dissolves into soft fog. You can sleep now. Thanks for listening. Good night.